today. I know we had some upgrades or some additional
Yes.
information that was needed on some things, so.
Yes.
Linda, your
Yes.
game, go.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So again, just in front of you today, not as much paper as last time. Continuation of the outstanding issues that we were working on, and we want to go back, and there's two issues that you had some clarifications necessary. And then we're going to talk about implementation of the new code. Clay will talk about that process. And then what to look forward at our meeting next week too, for the mapping process and additional guidance for residential amendments, because that's what's coming up after commercial industrial employment campuses, the continuation of our work on the residential districts. So starting with commercial dwelling units in the commercial districts, Tom had written up some information with what associated means, so if you want to have that discussion, because I believe there's clarification that was wanted for that item.
Sure. I think Commissioner Wance, you had suggested directly connected was one of the suggestions you had as opposed to associated with. And I went back and did some research. And directly related would probably be a better way to put it. And that basically means that two things are very closely associated with each other so that one suggests the other, one cannot exist without the other. So basically, as it relates to the residents with the business, I think that allows, I hope, Mr. Voigt here, from a zoning perspective, when somebody comes in and tries to say this is, directly related to, there's a foundation on which to use it. And the associated with, I looked at that, and that was, basically just says they're closely related. And
Yeah, left it
that,
too
that,
wide open.
yeah, so anyhow, if that's okay, we will go with that and see if there's
Thoughts?
any comments, from the outside or
Could you
anything.
cite
we'll
an
look at.
example that exists in the county now?
Well, I think what we were referring to is a residence associated with, is what we said, a business. And so, now, if we use directly related to, in other words, you can't just say that, say, your cousin's living in the house, so that's
Oh,
directly
I got it.
related.
I
It has
remember
to
the
be-
conversation.
Yeah, it has to be
Yeah,
based
I
on the
remember.
fact that
Yeah, it
that,
wasn't anything, yeah.
the use
I
of that
got you.
residence exists because of the business. Does that make
But-
sense?
Yeah,
And it's the use now, it's the use. That's what I want to it's the residential use must be directly related to the business use.
but if you're saying that the residence, that one has to be there for the other one to exist?
It's just that one or the other cannot exist without the other. So it does, it can,
That would, you could say, basically, if you were an industrial place and you had a lot of equipment stored outside,
Right.
and you needed on-site security,
Right.
and you had someone living there for that on-site security, that's directly related to the work, to the company, watching over their material.
But if somebody has a small business and has a residence co-located with that small business, they don't have to live there to have that small business.
Not in the business zone, they wouldn't.
But I want them to be allowed to live there. I want, the,
well,
the
they could because they were
examples.
the owner, so they would be
They're
directly,
directly related to the business.
that residence.
I understand.
But to
and
rent it out to somebody else,
Right, no, I understand, as long as it can be defined that way where, because to me, somebody who is living there and has a small business, whether it's a, I don't care, auto mechanic shop, do they really have to live there, even though they're the owner? They could live somewhere else and the auto mechanic
Absolutely.
shop could still exist.
Absolutely.
But the way that's defined is, one has to be there for the other one to be there. And
Except for it's only referring to the dwelling being directly related. It's not saying the vehicle
Business.
repair has to be directly
Yeah,
related.
I think we want to get to the end state that I'm looking for. I just want to make sure that how it's defined, that it doesn't get into, I don't want to say legalese,
well,
but this.
once again, it could also fall under customarily incidental as an accessory use. It's something that would be normal for that general business pattern to have on the
Yeah.
property.
So why can't we
So, I
say
mean,
it
so
that
but
way?
Well, we could, that's, the way we say accessory uses are
Right.
defined, customarily incidental to.
Right.
But like I say, that would have to be a general business practice, not just one specific,
What happens in the case where a guy lives on his property, maybe has a mechanic shop, gets older and decided he wants to sell the business and still live there at that time?
Right.
Well, if it's, that would be a question that I think would have to be looked at that time. I mean, if it's in the business zoning, the business can be there. I mean, that's not a
Well, he
question. The
decided
business
he's
can be
older,
there.
just wants to live on the site. He's been for 30, 40 years and sold the business or transferred the business to a
Someone
sibling.
else, that would be, I think that would be a question we would have to look into.
He would still be able to stay there, no problem.
Would he?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just, he would not, and then if he sold that property within a year of that date, he would still be able to be a resident. But if it's any further than that, then it comes into question whether it needs to be, goes back to the original zoning, which would be commercial.
So,
No, I don't think, no, I think what you were discussing, please correct me, anybody. You're discussing that's not gonna be the case here. What you were discussing the last time is that we would basically make all those residences that exist now conformable.
Correct.
Basically
Correct.
conformable, so that would not be applicable
If it was
in,
existing.
yes,
If
if
it
it
was
was
existing.
existing. And you
Okay.
talked about not allowing
It
any
was
new
like-
ones,
It was
new
not-
separated
Right,
residences.
it was not my intent to come up with a list of 55 what-ifs. It was my intent to get away from associated with.
Okay.
So I apologize. That's all I wanted to do, was clarify associated with. I wasn't trying to say who can live where.
Right.
Well, this is getting, it gets complicated in this, and it's not a simple answer on most of these things. And what we're doing has a lot of far-reaching,
Okay, but that's not part of this
No,
discussion.
but what we've already done is it says we've already allowed all existing dwellings in commercial districts as a permitted use. Therefore, your example of someone living there 30 years, you can stay in that
Yeah.
house. It's permitted use. We're talking about
New stuff.
But new stuff,
starting
you
from
would
when
have
this
to be,
ordinance passes, from when these zoning codes, what do you call them, pass. That's different. So if you've only been living there like 2 years, they would throw him out.
Yeah.
that's what I'm afraid is what you're getting right to.
So as long as it, is defined that meets the intent, we're good. I just, the comment if one has to be there for the other one to exist is concerning just because you don't have to live there,
as an existing house, if it's
Right.
an existing business, and
Right.
you'd be allowed to live there, that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah,
But if it was a new company coming in, new structure, a whole new site and everything, and they wanted to put a house on, there would have to be a reason connected to that business to have that residence put on that property.
Exactly.
But for an existing one, it would be fine.
Which is good.
So you're okay with directly related? Do you prefer that than to associated with?
Yeah, I didn't want to get into a debate about who can live where. I just wanted to, I wanted to hone in on because associated with is so broad. That's all I meant to do. Apologize.
nothing to apologize,
Yeah, I think
just
those
not,
are good
it's not about just, it's about defining it appropriately. And directly, if that meets the needs, then that's fine. If,
Well,
yeah, as long as it
one thing I may
doesn't
suggest,
hamstring us.
Commissioner, this, as with everything else you're discussing here, you'll find out if it meets the needs with some of the comments you get in the future, once this is, put back out for public comment. I mean,
Yeah.
We'll get it.
That's true.
We'll refine it. So I think at some point in time, you have to say, okay, this is as good as we think it can get. We'll wait and see what the future
Yeah.
comments and how it fleshes out. Because I
That's fine.
suspect a lot of these things that are being discussed may be rediscussed or reconsidered at some point in
Correct.
time in the future
Okay.
with other suggestions.
Okay, so moving on to page 3. We had to go back and look at contractors' equipment storage. You wanted more discussion. So for that discussion, provided in front of you were the list of the 12 contractor equipment storage facilities that have conditional use from 1980 to the present with their associated map. So you could see where they were located in the business.
And what their new zoning category would
Were any of these ever not a conditional use? Were they ever permitted use where they are? So they've all started as a conditional
Yes.
use.
All contractors' equipment storage
Yes.
are
Are conditional
conditional
uses.
uses. At,
I don't see the problem then. Why couldn't it just stay the way it is? It's still a conditional use.
and what the board had suggested, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it would become actually more permissive by being
Yes.
permitted uses in C2, C3, I1, and I2, and a conditional use only in C1.
Correct.
Well, I mean, if it's always been a conditional use, we're not taking away any rights of any property owner that has these particular yards. Everything's exactly the same as it was, we're not harming them in any way. I mean, I think that was it's been the intent of most of the stuff that we would change right here, so they would have the same rights they had when they started with the business, or they started with the house, whatever it happened to be. Same right, we haven't taken any of those rights away, and I would like to be consistent with that. We haven't taken anything away from these individuals here.
I agree. Leave it the way it is.
Well, wait, just to be clear.
Yes.
So the way the new zoning code is written, the proposal as it sits today, is that there's no opportunity for permissible use for contractors, equipment storage yards in either any of the C districts. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so the question is, do you want to allow them in the C districts, A,
Right.
and if so, how? And the last discussion was conditional for C1, permitted for C2 and C3.
Correct.
That was the last question.
And, yeah,
Just making sure everyone's.
I agree with that.
So conditional in C1 and then permitted in C2.
And C3.
C3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what about
And
the I district?
the I's.
And the I's.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's what we ended with
Mm-hmm.
on Tuesday.
Well, it was, but I'm,
Like there's only one in your
if we're going
district.
back and revisiting, I'm saying. we should be
Are you familiar with them?
Now, let me go
I got
one step
one.
See, that's
further.
where I
Yeah,
So you
right,
think
because,
it's-
because that's the way it's been. We're not taking anything away from these particular property owners. They've always been conditional. They'll still be conditional in whatever zoning it happens to be.
And most of them were, I think, ag zoning to start this, and we haven't touched on that yet.
Correct.
But they still would be permitted in ag zoning,
As a conditional, as they are now.
conditional use.
Yes, yes.
Well, that, unless you change that
Right,
when you
unless
go
that's
through the
changed, but right now there's no,
exit.
Change it
correct.
later.
Yes.
And that's actually where most of these are. This 12 is a pretty small list compared to the
Yes.
ag list.
And see, that's where comprehensive rezoning comes in. We have to look at all the parts here as we go through each of these, and have to be careful we don't cut something out in the process.
Currently, there are conditional uses in the ag zone and both of the business zones, BNR and BG,
And the others.
and the IRs as well. So they're conditional pretty much everywhere. And I assume they're not permitted in residential?
Not- No,
Yeah, and I'm not sure about conservation, Jen.
no, they're
No,
not.
not
Is it
conservation.
Conservation, residential, they are not permitted.
And so the change was to eliminate them from the commercial districts, either as conditional uses or permitted, or permitted. So to eliminate them. So the board discussed last week, putting them back into the commercials and making them basically not just permitted uses.
Correct.
No conditional use required.
Except for C1.
Except for C1.
Right. That's what we said last week.
Right.
It's a new day.
But not a new week. We're still in the same week.
Yeah.
as last week.
That's right.
It seems like last week. It's only 2 days ago. It's been a long 2 days.
So.
I mean, to be frank, I'm good with either one, I really am. My whole thing is, let's be consistent, we're trying not to take any rights away from anybody. I think that's why we're going over all this, and we haven't taken any rights away from these people
Correct.
if they stay conditional. If the board wants to make them permitted in C2 and C3, conditional C1, I'm okay with that. I'm just pointing one over factor out.
Right. The big change is in the proposal, taking it away from
Right.
Right.
the business districts to begin with.
Yes.
So it's really, I guess, a question of whether or not you want them to permitted or conditional
Right.
in those districts.
Again, my comment stays the
Sure.
same. Permitted in C2, C3, the industrial zones, and conditional in C1.
Yeah, that's where we left it.
Yeah, it
I
was.
agree with that.
I do as well.
Okay.
That's fine.
You just can't live there.
Yeah. Let's not go there.
Only joking.
Where are we at?
So now we're off to,
Number 10.
number 10, a new discussion on the trade. So Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, this is another case of what was previously permitted in the BG and now will be conditional, same as we just talked about for a few other uses in the new C2 district. This may not be comprehensive, but I've identified 3 uses that would become non-conforming, and one of those we have actually heard from that would like not to be non-conforming. So we just want to bring this to your attention, that whether or not you would like to go back to making these uses permitted in the C2. By right, rather than conditional.
Are we adding any of the definition to trades, or is that's it, machine shops, welding, carpentry, and print shops?
Yes, but I think the way the use table reads, it says, or similar uses, to capture things that may come in the future, and for Jay to interpret.
So they're currently permitted in BG
Yes.
right now. BG, some BG changing to C2.
Correct.
Yes.
So my
Those are those
feeling is-
3,
Right, my
right.
feeling is they should be permitted in C2 then as well.
Agree.
Okay, so-
What about a print shop, a small print shop in a C1, say?
Not small,
Oh, it's small.
just kidding.
We have that as a conditional use in the C1.
Yep.
Okay, can have things.
And we did not, I have not identified any of those that will be in the C1. The only one I know of that had a problem was in the C2.
Well, identified, but I mean,
Right.
it could
Right,
be
exactly.
somebody
Right.
starting.
Well, if
Absolutely.
they're starting, then they could get the conditional use.
Okay,
So option 2 on that one?
Sounds good.
correct.
I think overall, we don't want to hurt any existing businesses.
No.
Just give-
Right.
Not the purpose.
Okay, number 11 is another example of that. This use, we currently know of one that exists in the BG district in Limeboro, which will now be prohibited in all 3 commercial districts, which this one that I'm talking about would be going into the C2 district. It also, I should point out also, it's been brought to my attention that this business does sell fertilizer, but it is not related to the discussion that we had earlier this week. They sell bagged fertilizer, which in discussing
Yes.
with Jay, would be considered an accessory use to that business. So, I don't know, Linda, if you want to go into more detail
Yes.
about this particular.
So, just, one of in the letter, we said if we sent you, we incorrectly placed you in error, with your future zoning for rural villages or for any of the districts, please let us know. This was one of the ones that has a future land use designation of commercial, or industrial rural village. So it would be appropriate to be able to move them into the I-1 district and still be consistent, with the 2014 master plan as well. And so it's more of a corrective action that they're currently zone BG and it's allowed, but in the new C district, it is not. So the recommendation would be for this one or similar properties like this would be moved to I-1. And then having the allowance of the milling operation to be allowed as well in I-1.
Have you heard any? that's
And
your
this is just one
constituent?
example.
You heard anything?
But presently, that's conditional use, right, as a milling?
In the I-1,
Mm-hmm.
or IR, Jay, is that,
That's the new one. It's not now.
But they're in the BG.
Oh, okay.
Remember, we gotta go back to what
Right
they are
one.
now.
That's right, wrong book.
I mean, so they're allowed to do it, they're currently in BG.
Yeah, they're in BG right now.
Right, so that's,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
yeah, so they're currently allowed in BG, it's just the moving of them into the C2 because they were in the rural village, it's a small property. That seemed to make the most sense at the time, but now looking at more details to what's there and what they do on the property specifically, and given where C2 fell, it's no longer appropriate.
Yeah. My only hang-up, and I think that's that's the right correction to make. I'm a little hung up with this fertilizer thing.
And flour in one spot?
Well, no, the milling is what it is, but there seems to be a hang-up with what is bulk and what is bagged.
The way we've
Why- why-
identified
why-
bulk,
Usually decided, I looked at it as loose material.
Well, I understand what it is, but it seems to be an issue. When fertilizer comes up, flags go up.
Well, fertilizer in bags usually is not in, they're sold in places usually not in, unless it's like a Home Depot or something. They have lots of it out there, but
Right.
generally it's smaller quantities. It's not,
Okay,
a huge, 30 tons of
right.
fertilizer is stored on the property.
Well, I get that, but are we saying that they have to have special permission to sell bagged fertilizer at these places?
No.
Okay,
no, we specifically said that if it's not in prepared packing, you have to have the special permission. But in
So it would be
prepared
bulk,
packing.
it would basically bulk.
okay,
Yeah,
so,
that's how we
okay,
define
I
it.
didn't know it said prepared
Right.
packaging, okay.
Yes.
Isn't that regulated by the Department of Environment anyway, for bulk?
Bulk is, maybe,
I have no idea.
I do not know.
yeah. That's an untouched area for
I-
them, 'cause
No, it isn't. They are regulated.
Are they? Did they
They're
check you?
inspected and
yeah?
regulated, but I just want to know, now, this, you're dealing with the Limeberg, but what about the Hampstead plant?
They're fine.
They're fine?
No, we discussed that
I thought,
last.
because they were gonna be
time.
allowed to have the bulk.
With an approval
With- yes.
by the zoning administrator, was what was decided at the last.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's what we did the last, yeah, it had to be the permission of the zoning administrator.
Yeah.
Because of the bulk,
Because of the bulk,
Because-
yes.
right.
So going
That's
back
where
to
I-
this one, yeah.
I just don't want to make sure we don't, in these smaller operations, that, a couple pallets of fertilizer
Yeah.
doesn't set off an alarm, that's
No,
all.
it does not.
Okay.
No. Just one other question here, we're looking at flour, grain, and milling. There's a lot of small businesses starting up with milling, growing an acre of wheat or two and milling their own products. Same as the brewers, they're starting a lot of small bakeries. The way this is, they're not allowed with C1, 2, and 3?
Correct. Well, now, yes.
So you can have a
That-
small business along, say, Lomboro C1, and they're growing,
I think
milling
if-
some of the small grains for
Usually-
baking, and this is,
I would think someone who is doing that type of thing is growing wheat or whatever, and milling it on site is usually more in an agricultural district than in a business district, because they're gonna have to be growing it on the property. So that's gonna be a
well,
use that's.
say
gonna
they
be
grow
more
it on a
specific.
joint or a property down the road and just bringing it back to there for the milling, and you have a small, this is like the small breweries popping up, you're seeing a lot of this coming about with their specialty flours and all that.
Well, like I say, if it was on the same property, it's one thing, but like I say, if you're trucking it from somewhere else, then, yeah, you're a milling operation, and you would have to meet the code.
Okay, I own a C1 house along the road, and the field's a mile down the road. Bringing the product back there to mill and bag it in small quantities to sell at a farmer's market somewhere. It's much like
But
we're doing
the
with breweries
problem-
and distilleries.
Problem with that is a lot of times is that it's not a one-property operation, that they're bringing products from other properties and milling it there also. So it's just not me owning a property and having a mill on it and then bringing my own wheat down to mill it. It's also, I'm going to buy it from Mary and mill it, or I'm gonna, from other people and bring it back to my, that's a general milling operation. It's not a specific type thing.
But there's no great volume.
Can you mill on a small scale? I'm not
I
familiar
don't
with
know
milling
how
process.
profitable it would be. I mean, I know we have a small mill up at Union Mills. They produce their own. But like I say, they
It's a
bring all their
relatively new
product from
thing
on site.
popping up, and we're not allowing them
I would say,
to.
and this, everybody can give me their opinion, if it's 3,500 square feet or less in size, you could call it an artisan manufacturing
That's
and
also
production.
There you go.
You know,
That'd
that,
be something too.
because that includes,
That's good.
homemade food products and things like that. So I think that, if it's a small scale like you're talking about, Commissioner, and a small operation, I mean, that,
It
it
could
would
be.
fall under that, in my opinion.
It could very well.
Because you can manufacture and produce commercial goods. You can do both. So the milling would be manufacturing and all. So I think as long as it stayed under that, it would be. Now, once you've gone, above that square footage, then you're in a different scale.
What happens if the business grows?
Pardon?
What happens if the business starts to grow right to that marginal?
It's actually, Commissioner, that's like with any business. I mean, they start out
Branch
small.
out.
If they grow, and it gets to the point where they're outgrowing their property, they need to realistically possibly look for another property if their business has become that profitable and they have that much volume, because they're not gonna be able to keep up on a small property then.
All right, back to the original question. I'm good with the I. I mean, I am, I don't know.
Number 2 for the number 11.
Yes.
We'll talk about it.
Right.
Okay.
I think that solves that issue. The only other question I have is the rural village thing. We got the rural village and the way in which they are,
The land use designations.
yeah,
for
the land use,
master plan.
the LUDs for our rural villages.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit challenged by some of those, but is that a topic for discussion later or what? Because when I first got involved with these folks, everything in Lineborough is right now,
Oh, and that's because of their base zoning,
right.
yeah. The rural
And maybe,
villages.
maybe 110 years ago that was true, but now
Yes.
there's nothing in there.
No doubt,
Everybody
they
lives
need
there.
some special attention unto themselves, and
Right.
that's something we can consider to do in the future as part of our work plan and
Okay.
planning. As soon as we get done all of this, I think
Yeah,
that,
that's
I
fine.
think
Okay,
that
that's why
makes
I asked.
good
Is it a
sense.
discussion for now or later on,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
We-
kind of where this started with the rural village thing, so.
Correct.
About
And during
80%
the
of them
master
are in my
plan,
district, I think.
100%, I mean, it was a lot to tackle at that time.
Right.
So that is something that we've begun a rural villages document, picking up from a document that was already currently housed in planning.
Okay.
So I think just we need to give some special attention to the rural villages 100%. And that's why we kept that flexibility of the commercial/industrial, just kind of knowing the nature of rural villages for a future land use designation.
Okay.
And just understanding kind of each one is so unique, really,
Right.
they truly are.
Okay.
So option 2 on that one?
Yes.
For number 12, if I could, it might be easier to follow along if I direct your attention to the part of the new code that is related to this, which is pages 8 and 9. This was brought to our attention by one of the attorneys, who's written into you, so you've seen this comment. This is regarding the distance requirements, which are existing in the code. We've reformatted it to list all the uses that are affected by it in this one section, whereas it used to be in a different section. So if you look at 158.040 on page 8, it's the new chapter 158. It has a highlighting thing in the front.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Wait, is that it? No, yeah, no.
So as I said, currently, these distance requirements are in place for many uses, mostly industrial, and it requires that these uses be separated from adjoining residences, schools, religious establishments, and institutions for human care. And this ranges between 200 feet to, I believe it goes up to 1,000 feet for the things on page 9 under D. Kind of see why when you look at those. A request has been made to change the existing requirement in 2 ways. First, to clarify that a multi-tenant building or site, for that, the setback is from the use and not the entire building or site. So that's the first issue.
Say it again, sorry, we were
Okay.
still leaping through.
Okay. The request has been made to differentiate between this requirement in general and to clarify that for a multi-tenant building or site, the setback is from the use and not from the entire building or site.
The only question I would have, if it's a multi-tenant building, the whole use is multi-tenant. I mean, the building itself is the use. I mean, it's not
But
the
the request
individual
is regarding if
apartments.
one part of the building has the use that's considered onerous here, like,
Right.
Something
if the
different.
crematory is only on one part of the building, for instance,
And then the other part is,
a house.
yeah, that can't be next to each other.
Right, well, that's a bad.
You need this, yeah, you need the separation
Yeah.
requirement.
I mean, I still don't understand what that question is.
Let's see,
Well, if
I
you
mean,
have,
if you're looking at a
if you have light
crematorium or a
manufacturing
funeral
on one
home,
part of the building, and the other one is just a retail store, they would not, but the part that needs the separation is the part with the retail store, if that's where it would be measured from. They wanted to be measured only from the part of the building that's being used for the use
Instead of
that's
the
listed
entire-
here.
Or the entire site.
So,
Let's try to
so
pick
if we have a
two good ones.
multi-use site, and we have one of these that require 2 times the distance.
Right.
And Jay, how, or anybody, how would it be measured now? Would that higher, we have 10 uses in there, only one requires the double distance. All the 9 require just single distance. Would we measure all the
Right.
distances as the double distance? Do you follow?
Yes,
I mean, it's a
Jay.
square building.
I don't-
Clay, Clay.
Clay?
This wouldn't
you're
be a
saying-
square building, though. Say we have one that's,
If you're talking
Well,
multiple,
I'm just trying to
if
keep
you're
it
talking,
simple.
right, if you're talking multiple uses on one
Yeah.
property, if you're talking retail sales in one building and housing in another building, I think I can see it, but if they're all in the same building, there's no way to differentiate
I don't
between
think-
the units and the retail use, because the retail use might be on the first floor, and the residences are gonna be right above it on the second floor.
That's what this is.
No, I don't think it's really, this is from
Isn't that
residents.
industrial?
Well-
And then you have the flooring and
Right.
tile.
Oh, from,
Good
well,
might have,
So the, what are we talking about here, whatever the,
so I could say like the dispensing.
I'd say I'm still not sure what the question
Cannabis.
is.
well, if the.
I mean, right now, if you have a use on a property,
I think
it
cannabis
requires a
is a good
separation.
example. Next to.
Depending on the acreage size of that property that adjoins it is what's going to determine where you're measuring to. If it's a residence that's next door that's under 3 acres, you're measuring to the property line.
you know, actually,
If it's over 3 acres, you're measuring to the building.
Right.
So, I
but you
mean, that's
measure
how,
to the use.
Right, we did actually add that into the code
Yeah.
back in February.
Right, that was a lot of
Yes.
discussion.
I can,
Yeah, I remember that discussion.
Um,
I mean,
A lot of it
one
had
of
to
the
do around
big ones is-
cannabis, I
let me
think.
tell you where that is.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, that's probably one of the ones you'd see the most conflict is where you have the
Think about how much
dispensaries for
strip.
cannabis would probably most likely be in a
Separated
type of
here.
complex directly next to
on the same
something
property, it
that, it would
Doesn't require
not,
it.
would not have
because
a
these are for
distance
adjoining property.
requirement.
These requirements are for adjoining, not,
I understand.
And the new language that Commissioner Frazier was referring to is on page 10, 158.060. When measuring a required separation between uses, distance shall be determined from the nearest point of the structure occupied by the use requiring separation to the nearest point of the boundary
so,
of
and
the
just,
lot.
so
So I
if
guess
I'm
you would-
getting what you're saying, if I have a strip store and one of the uses in the middle of the strip
Right.
store is a use that requires a 400-foot setback, it would be measured from that unit in that strip center, not from the outside edge of that
Correct.
building.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
I understand that. Okay.
That's what you would do.
Yes.
Yes.
You measure from the use to the boundary.
Right.
Okay, so we've already got that in.
Yeah, we,
Okay.
It's a lot to process.
I
Well, it's
believe
just-
we've already addressed that 4 months ago.
Yeah,
I hate
yeah.
to say it, but some of these requests are absurd.
Okay, the second
just bringing
one-
them forward.
Hang in there.
Okay, the second one is to add language stating that the requirement does not apply to uses that are located within the same development as the uses or buildings requiring the setback. And that would maybe be an employment campus or a business park that allows residential uses or institutional uses. So they're saying that within the same development, that separation requirement would not apply. That's the request.
so with that, if we're on an employment campus and we're allowing townhouses in that employment campus and we're having a business that requires that separation, you're saying it doesn't apply to that if it's all in the same,
That's
in the
the
same
request,
development?
yes.
My only question to that is if we're requiring it everywhere else,
It's a double
why
standard.
wouldn't be, it's a double
Right, I
standard,
would
why
agree with
wouldn't we
that.
require it to, the residences in that area? I mean, I don't care either way.
Just
but
because you bought your townhouse in the employment campus, you don't have the same rights.
You can be
as
closer
someone
to
else.
something that maybe you should be farther away from?
And honestly, when they buy
I don't
the
think you
house, are
would,
they being
'cause it's
told that there is no distance separation from
Industrial
what they
use.
would typically think
Right.
that they had in a residential zone?
They're still smelting like
Right.
No,
that.
Well, maybe not that bad in that
Yeah.
district, but
I would- Let's say no change.
You could have a cannabis dispensary in the middle of an employment campus or something, potentially, and be in compliance. And you're saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I agree.
I'm saying, if you bought a townhouse in the middle of an employment campus, you should have the same rights as somebody bought a townhouse, no
I'm
matter
with
where
you.
it is. For the same setbacks and everything else, you have the same right, the same quality of life.
Yeah, I don't get this one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Number one, no change.
Just
to
keep
the-
it how we
Explain
have
it a
it.
little bit here.
I'm not sure you can.
I think the cannabis dispensary would be a good
that's-
example. Like if you had an employment campus and you dropped a cannabis dispensary right in the middle of it, the people that live there would be like, well, why is that rule not apply to us here, but applies outside of this campus?
Yeah.
One question, you do need to look at this, though. When you look at that distance requirement section, it lists what zoning districts it applies to. It only applies to any lot in a residential district. If it's in the ag distance, if it's 3 acres or less. If it's 3 acres or more, it's measured differently. Or if it's occupied by a school or church or institution for human care. So that's the only time these distance requirements apply.
Doesn't relate to residences.
It doesn't relate to a
Commercial,
business to, in a commercial zoning
or
district.
in an employment campus.
Right, because they're not listed. They're only listed in those specific
Right.
districts.
So it's not
So if it's in a commercial
So I don't
or
see why.
business or
I don't see
industrial,
why we're spending time on it then. Sorry, I just,
I guess the idea is that if you're buying a residence in an employment campus or a business zone, then you realize that
that you're going to be
that
closer
you're
to
gonna be
everything.
closer to businesses or, right, yes.
one would think that your eyes are open when you buy. I don't
That's a good
know.
one, Commissioner.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a good one.
Well, mine certainly are. Man, I-
Move next to a farm and
Good, well, good grief. I'm of the mindset not to change it, but
Okay.
that's just me.
No change.
All right, number one.
Okay, so number 13, I would direct your attention in that same text amendment you're looking at to pages 23 through 25. And this is regarding amending the existing business park development in the county. There's currently only one business park approved in the county. The new zoning text leaves in place all the language applying to this use, allowing it to remain without non-conforming status, unaffected by the new code. There has been a request made, however, to amend the existing code, basically, that applies only to this property that we are grandfathering in. And I'll go, because there's A through G. And this was sent in a very detailed letter by Clark Schaefer that you received, I believe it was in April.
Yes.
So the first comment was to add language that an industrial park is not a planned commercial center and shall not be subject to any of the provisions of the code as they relate uniquely to a planned commercial center. And in reviewing Liberty Exchange, I don't know if Tom or Clay have any comments regarding how that would affect.
Yeah, well, that was my first question. What are we talking about? That's the one we're talking about?
Yes.
The
Yes,
existing one is down
specifically,
on?
yes.
That's the only business park that we have right now.
Okay.
Currently.
And where is it?
Liberty Exchange on 26, Bosca Pasta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
And are they asking that they just, these occur for any industrial park at the time that this is adopted? And then
Nope.
going, or is this for now as well as
Now.
going forward?
No, not as far as going forward. This has been, the way it was grandfathered, it's creating a separate use, which is a business industrial park, which is approved prior to April 1st, 2019, meaning forever and always, it will only be this one
Gotcha.
property that this
Gotcha.
language applies to. We also have created the new business park and industrial park, which is elsewhere in the new code.
so basically, we're saying we want to leave all the allowances and uses of Liberty Exchange the way they are
Yes.
currently, and when they were agreed to, when they put it in place.
Yes.
That's one. And then the second is a lot of this work to go into furthering, define business industrial parks, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The way the language in the code you have in front of you, the proposed
Right.
code reads, it just leaves all the existing language in place. This amends what's currently in the code. This proposal that we're looking
Right.
at, A through G,
Amends this.
amends the existing code as carried forward into this proposed.
Okay.
Do you want me to go through all of them and then you can discuss them?
Please do.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a lot of detail.
It is a lot of detail. Okay, the language also has been requested to say, in addition to the uses allowed in the I-1 district, uses permitted by right in the C3 district may be located within an industrial park.
So currently, the industrial park obviously is in the IR district. So this is also allowing everything that's in the current I-1 as written, in addition to the C3 as proposed.
This change is easier maybe to understand. Increase the size of any permitted retail use from 6,000 square feet to 25,000 square feet. And you can see on page 23, 2 says the size of any individual retail or commercial use may not exceed a maximum of 6,000 square feet except for daycare centers and health clubs. The proposal has been to change the 6,000 to 25,000.
So let's back out of this for a second. And I think we're gonna need to go one by one and have conversation. The allowance, basically making everything that's allowed in the I-1 into now C3 is what's being proposed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The
Say that,
intent,
wait a
Yeah.
minute, say that
No, no,
again?
no.
That's not
That's
right.
not right.
Oh, it's not?
No.
You're getting both.
Yeah.
say that
Oh,
one more
yeah,
time?
you're getting
No,
both.
They want, they're
Right,
requesting
right.
both.
Both what?
C1
C3 and I-1.
Allowed in the,
That's what I thought.
In the,
planned business.
in a planned business
In-
park.
yes.
Okay.
In this
That
business industrial.
A business industrial park would then be identified as both I-1 and C3?
Or at least all those uses.
Correct.
All those
Right,
uses.
not on the
Uses.
map, but yes.
No, all the
But it would
uses.
apply.
Would be applied, correct.
So that means large, C3 is large retail, like the
Correct.
Walmarts and the Targets.
Yes, correct.
They're kind of doing pass-through in reverse.
Yes.
Yeah. Good thought, good point.
So we look at what Liberty Exchange is, and then with the vision of having additional industrial business parks in the county. 'Cause that's the way it is in other counties. I mean,
Right.
I coming from Anne Arundel, that mixed use is common. Well, not always common, but it's there. So we gotta look past just Liberty Exchange, we gotta look at other opportunities for mixed-use locations. In order to make them competitive in the county,
Wait, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think all of this section only relates to Liberty Exchange because of the way that the beginning is written.
Yes,
It
we
had to
also
have been
have created,
established.
toward the end of this document, a new business park, which is primarily business with 20% industrial, and a new industrial park, which is the mirror image
Right.
of that, mostly industrial with 20% business.
but what's good for the goose, good for the gander. So if I'm looking at what's good for Liberty Exchange down in the south part of the county, if another industrial business park is going to be developed, in
Right, that's
future
what you're saying.
years, whether it's in Mount Airy, large parcel that's been looked at, or other location in the county, we want to have the ability to build it out, and make it,
So that,
so, yeah.
so as the new industrial park language would allow, it, as it stands, the draft at the moment, would allow, additional uses permitted may include uses by right in the C3 district, provided that no individual use may exceed 10,000 square feet. So there, and it comprised no more than 20% of the entire industrial park. So there is some of that language. May not go as far or may go too far.
It's actually
Right.
simpler because it doesn't have all it doesn't have some of the other things that are in the current business park, some of the current regulations. We tried to simplify it for going forward.
In the same thing that we're, that we've been talking about is we want to keep those businesses that are there, you know,
Right.
and not hinder them and just keep moving forward and allow them to do what they're doing. So when Liberty Exchange was put in place and all the agreements, were the things that are being recommended here part of those agreements?
No.
No, that, what was.
No?
No, so these are additional recommendations
'Cause what's
for
in-
their current,
In addition to,
what they
what-
currently have as
currently
the
have.
Because all,
planned business part.
because all the team did
Right.
was take the business industrial park
Correct.
language from the existing code and put it into this code with some very slight changes, like changing code sections and adding
Right.
that April 1st, 2019 date.
Right,
and
so
things.
that way, whatever they have now, they would still have that this new legislation would not affect their operation.
That was the purpose of keeping them in it all, in that, the way that's written.
Right, we're not,
Right.
the team didn't suggest moving them into the new language for industrial park or business park.
Correct.
Trying not to affect them. But now they want additional changes to
Correct.
what they
Yes.
built under in the first place.
Yes.
You want them bigger.
well, they want to fill their space, they want to make it competitive, and they want to
Yeah,
do
but I
it
mean,
right.
it's bigger. I mean,
Yeah,
they're trying to increase, the request is to increase it.
part of it is.
But I
Yeah.
think to
The
Commissioner
625,000.
Rothstein, I'm sorry,
Please.
no, that, I think what you're suggesting is maybe whatever we come up with here that's specific to now this particular
Right.
project, then would now become a replacement
Correct.
for, okay.
So
For the
you're
future.
using that-
Yes, for the future, so
you're
that would
using that
change the
as a
industrial.
As a pilot,
It is.
right.
It's the first industrial business park,
Sure.
and it has, one, it's successful. Two, it has potential to be even more successful. We, you know, with this microbrewery and other things that they can potentially put in that location.
Sure.
It's a good template.
Yeah.
You know.
So I'm not gonna argue with you on the success of that. I see a lot of empty space there, so it would be up to the interpretation of what success means. But with that aside, there are,
Yeah,
there are a
right,
couple
yeah.
successful businesses that
Right.
are operating there.
Right,
But there's a lot of space that's empty that is not.
in the front.
Does this
as you
help
say.
to
Yes.
enhance the possibility of making it
Absolutely.
more successful?
Absolutely.
That would be my question.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
That's all.
And
Right.
the intent here is not whatsoever to give any competitive advantage to a specific vendor. It is, how do we provide Carroll County a competitive advantage in putting business industrial parks? And you're right, that's what this would
Yeah.
do. This would allow them to work and fill those spaces appropriately. Now, the challenge is up front, the
Well,
storefronts,
right.
you're right, there's some
Yeah, and I'm not
see-through, but-
poo-pooing the fact whether
No.
it's successful or not.
Right,
But
but-
as I drove through there,
Right. No, I understand what you're saying.
there's a lot of signs on windows, so
There-
that's all.
But they are moving in the right direction. I think
Right.
this would allow them to do that.
Okay.
And allow us to show that Carroll County can become, you know, have a competitive advantage in growing a business industrial
So,
parks.
so then to that degree, if these suggestions enhance the ability to be able to do what Ed just said, then off we go.
So just, one thing maybe we could do is if we want to go through here and see what you want to keep and what you don't want, then maybe concept team can go back and look at that in terms of then how we have the industrial and commercial parks for the moving forward, right? Unless you'd like to keep that language as is as well.
Well, no, I don't know
Okay.
that we could even do that. If we're gonna make these changes, we gotta make them across the board, right?
No,
I'm getting
they're-
lost, I
they're-
think.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're two separate issues. The one existing park was written under the current rules, and those
Right.
current rules have not been suggested, they have not been changed.
Okay,
The changes are only for any future park.
right.
Okay,
Okay, I'm up to speed with you on that.
Okay, good.
Number
and-
two.
And some of these suggested changes from Clark Schaefer are already incorporated. Some, maybe it doesn't go far enough, but some of them are already incorporated in the new industrial park and business park. Like I
Okay.
read earlier, 20% C3 and up to 10,000 square feet, which are
Okay.
more liberal, so to speak, than what you have in the existing.
Okay.
You know,
200 up the devil.
well, no, the value we have
I said your
is,
name.
value we have is
Like
a
Beetlejuice.
business park, a developer, and team that know what Bright looks like. The challenge is, this is the first time we've done it.
Yeah,
in
well, that's-
the county.
And
I'd like to start off by doing it right.
exactly, or get as close to right as we can.
Yeah. Huh?
You said they know what right looks like?
They know what Bright looks
They
like.
know what they want looks like.
They
That's
know
the
what,
difference.
they know what successful business, industrial, mixed-use
Wanna make it
parks
work.
look like. And they're successful doing it.
And less restriction, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
now,
so-
the key is to be, I guess, less restrictive, but to ensure, again, the vision of Carroll County is met, and that is to grow where it makes sense and occupy those spaces where it makes sense, and that's what they're doing here. So, what I don't want to do is, and be very clear again, what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander, and it's got to be looking at the county rather than the gander.
It's have to be like the entire
Right.
county, not
Okay,
just one
so-
spot.
Man, I love planning with what-ifs, because, man, we're gonna get them all.
Right. Yeah.
Have you looked at this list? And what are your recommendations? Instead of us trying to debate these
Right,
things, I think we'd like to hear from you, then we debate.
I'd kind of like to see the whole list read off first to give us a
Okay.
perspective.
Well,
'cause I
that's
like-
kind of what I'm doing, because if we
Go
read
ahead.
off the whole list, that's how we got lost. I'd rather hear what you, if you're gonna do that, tell us what you think about each one of them. Because then I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna sit here glazed over like I am now, attempting to try to get all the what-ifs done in my brain.
So you would want us to list all the rights in a I-1, right, and a C3? To
Well-
begin with, and then as you go down, they also want to include some other uses that are currently prohibited in the
I
C.
think it's important to see maybe in the whole
In the business
context
park.
and then go back and maybe pick it apart so that way we can.
Yeah, maybe that's.
Yeah, 'cause
Bring-
I'd like to
bring
know the
to you-
relativity. I don't want
right.
to debate on something early and not realize how
And
it's
I
going to
think it might
impact
be
later.
helpful too, Mary, if maybe when we go through this, we can say what we, as Roberta had stated, a lot of what they've asked for here has been put into the new language as well. So where there is the overlap with the new language and then some of the considerations for what's being proposed here. So maybe if we go down through all of it, and I know Paige in Economic Development had some considerations as well, so that might be a good way. Does that make sense to start?
Treat us like students.
Yeah, well, if the board was already comfortable with the new language,
Right.
that may be an easy way to start. Okay, you already liked this, so maybe you're
What from
okay
this do you
with putting
wanna
it
insert?
in.
What do you want to change about what we like?
Right, but again, that's where Commissioner Wentz is asking is, what are your recommendations on this 1 through G, or A through G? And what's the risk associated with keeping it, and what's the benefit
Yeah, there you go.
associated with keeping it?
Yeah.
So do you mind if we go through all of them? Because some of them are kind of interrelated and they play off the answer for the next thing. So,
Okay.
so we talked about in addition to the uses allowed in the I-1 district, uses permitted by right in the C3 would be allowed as well, increasing the permitted retail use from 6,000 to 25,000. And the existing proposal as it's written goes to 10,000. Delete the requirement that the development of the retail or commercial space shall be phased in with the development of the industrial uses such that the ratio of retail or commercial space to industrial space, which is not constructed, may not exceed 25% at any time until the business park is complete. This one's very hard to deal with because as tenants come in and out, that ratio is constantly changing. So do it based on the complete acreage instead, and I believe we've addressed that.
That's how the new industrial park is structured.
Right.
The percentage doesn't change with
The tenants coming in and out.
So you're saying D is already covered,
Yes, in the new
In the new.
proposal.
okay?
Allow the 13 uses currently prohibited in a business park. And that was something, Paige wanted to maybe bring your attention to, some of the items that are currently prohibited, and maybe see if you would wanna make those permitted.
And those are on page 24 of the
Right.
text, the,
Right,
it's A through M.
Yes.
So Jack and I took a look at the request to allow the uses that are currently prohibited, and the request is to allow them. And we went through one by one, and the general feeling was like, we would like to consider continuing to prohibit these uses in the business park district.
In the entirety?
The entire list, that's correct.
So that would be antique shops, auto service centers, day treatment,
Yeah,
or
there were some that we were more,
concerned with than
yeah,
others.
than others, not to pinpoint
Right.
any, but,
Go ahead
and
and
I do
pinpoint.
think the nonprofit clubs and fraternal organizations, I kind of thought we had
Damn.
taken care of that one anyway, but, there are some in this list that we would like to continue to keep out of a business park. Specifically, we discussed in length retail greenhouses, consignment shops, tattoo parlors, vehicle repair shops, commercial kennels, automobile service centers. Residential dwelling units are kind of already in as a result of, we're allowing that now. Retirement homes, I know there was some language allowing, I don't know, nursing versus something else. But in general, the consignment shops and tattoo parlors and retail greenhouses, commercial kennels, do not belong, we felt, in the business district.
There's no residential.
There's no residential in this. In the
In
new
our
code.
new code.
There may be,
Right,
yes,
I
but
was
in
saying,
this,
in the
it's
new
not.
code would allow for that, so we kind of didn't touch that.
The Goodwill that's on 26, is that in commercial space or industrial space?
Commercial, well, is that the IR zone? It's next to Walmart? We
That's
did-
it, that's in
we
the
rezoned
BG
that,
zone.
right?
BG.
It's all
Yeah.
rezoned BG, I think. That's right next to the Walmart, if I remember.
With
So
the
I
old
don't think
wall-
it's
the old
bad.
wall.
Used to be IR.
Yeah. It used to be,
Yeah,
it's
well,
now
we
BG.
rescind 1320 to BG
Mhm.
before they did their new business. My business.
I mean, I can understand a few, it's just some of these, I don't know, business industrial
Yes.
park.
It goes to your, thoughts, Ed,
Yeah,
about,
I know.
looking at the future.
Right.
But I also think we should rely, who better to tell us that than the economic development
Right.
folks? I mean,
I
you know
agree.
I mean, I'll throw it at you. Would St. John property appreciate a tattoo parlor in the front of their building down
Having the
there?
ability to put tattoo parlor in industrial business park, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, in Anne Arundel County, there are tattoo parlors in industrial parks.
Okay.
Uh,
So then you take that off the list.
So I mean, same
Or
thing
you'd
with.
suggest taking that off the
Correct,
list?
same thing with secondhand consignment. I mean,
did-
these are,
Did check in Anne Arundel County,
Yeah.
one of the zones that one of the parks was in.
Yeah.
And tattoo parlors were specifically prohibited.
in
think it was-
industrial?
In the Annapolis,
Well, yeah, in Annapolis, but, but,
it was Anne Arundel County.
I know
zone.
Black Locust, I think, is industrial zoned. It's a tattoo parlor.
Yeah, I don't recall
So, I just,
I didn't write the exact zone down, but they did
why I know
prohibit it.
that, but, well, I mean, I had to deal with some of this stuff,
Yeah,
and some of
right.
it was.
Well, that's why I'm asking you,
But,
because you've been there. I don't know. Is there a place, since that's the only one we have, it's the only one I
Yeah,
can refer to.
right.
You know, is it good to have a vehicle repair shop as soon as you turn into that down there?
But they are allowed to have a gas station
Correct.
in that location, which could have an auto repair, right?
Not necessarily.
Part next to it? No? Okay.
No, because a fuel outlet, like convenience store, fuel outlet is
Yeah.
a separate entity
From-
from vehicle repair.
Okay. I'm just trying to look at it from a reality
Yeah, I know.
standpoint. That's all.
What is best for an industrial business park?
Right. An industrial business park, again, right now, we have one. So we have to look at others as a template that are used in around surrounding counties. Just of what, again, success looks like and where we want to go. I don't want to be too restrictive in allowance in this industrial business park. And I think if we call out a dozen, we could call out another dozen to be
Right.
prohibitive. So why be so prohibitive? That's my only concern, you know. Some are not very appealing to me to be there, but, you know, but others, like an antique shop, why not? You know, an antique shop, type of thing.
Ed, if you were gonna go down this list, since that Liberty Exchange is in your district, what would you like to see in there?
What would you take off the list? And
Well,
try to take the
antique
personal
shops,
out
I
of it,
mean,
because I
people-
get it
Yeah,
too.
no, I get you.
Because I can tell you right now, my
Right.
mother wouldn't appreciate going to Basta Pasta and watching somebody get inked.
I agree.
Okay,
But you know-
so let's bring it real.
But what's good for me is not necessarily good for everybody.
Well, that's,
so-
I know, but on a general term, that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying disregard that.
Yeah, that's
On a-
right.
On a general thinking,
This is an industrial business park.
right.
Correct.
But,
Mother
but,
spend a lot of time in an industrial business park.
no, I'm just giving an
Okay.
example. I mean, that age group, I don't know
Right.
that they would appreciate a tattoo parlor beside a restaurant.
Grandma might get inked.
Well, she might if she's in a day care facility.
Well, that's true
That's
too.
allowed there.
Might want to wheel over and get them. I'm just trying to look at it from because we can sit here and argue about these 13 all day.
I know, exactly.
Well, what do
They
you
can-
want the county to look like?
Yeah, well.
Well, and not to pick on any particular one, but a commercial kennel, can you picture that in
Beside
that
Basta Pasta?
particular
Yeah, oh, that's
development?
perfect.
And if you were Basta Pasta, would you appreciate, I don't know, me personally, if I'm running a restaurant, I don't want a commercial kennel sitting next door to me. Now, that's a business decision,
But-
certainly.
But again, you gotta look at the industrial business park in its entirety, not just those handful of storefront. There are 4 or 5 pads. It goes in quite depth, from doctor's offices to whatever.
And that's true, but one thing you have to also think about is if you're gonna allow it in there, it's gonna be allowed anywhere in the park.
Right.
Not just in the
Right.
rear buildings or not
Right.
just in the front.
Right.
So theoretically, a commercial kennel could
It could.
end up next to a
Yep.
restaurant.
But hopefully the management company
Well, that's
and
management.
leasing
That's-
would best manage for their
But we're not
clientele.
basing this on
Right.
that.
No,
We
I
can't.
understand.
Again, like you said, you can argue every one of
Yeah,
these,
no, that's why I don't.
and there
like-
could be another dozen to argue.
Is there,
So I'd rather not
Is
be
it-
prohibitive.
it's sort of an interesting list.
It is.
Is there a, and I don't think anyone here in the room, maybe somebody does, knows how this list was ever created, but anyway, where the list ever came from. But anyway, is there, now that we have 3 business zones, is there some, these seem-ish more to me to be C2 kind of businesses and lower than C3 and higher businesses? Is there something, if you allowed, as was suggested, some C3s in the industrial park and just left it at that with a percentage and didn't try to distinguish whether that C3 was a commercial kennel or a greenhouse, and leave that up to the property owner.
Right.
But yet you limit the C3, in some way. So, as I think economic development would argue that you don't want your industrial land going to become commercial property, and you don't want your commercial property to become industrial property. There are distinctions for a reason. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. So when you're citing a future industrial park, you want it to be mostly industrial, I would think. And
Well,
when you're
business
citing-
industrial.
Well, in the future, we have industrial separate from business and business separate from industrial. I'm not solely talking about the existing. But again, trying to morph for the future too. Maybe we could do the same kind of thing that we've done in the for the future by putting in C3, but then we limit the C3 rather than limiting specific kinds of businesses. Does that make sense? Don't say tattoo, but say the way.
More in generality.
Right.
Yeah, say no C1 or C2, and I think a tattoo parlor honestly would be a C1 or a C2. Because they're generally small. I mean, I haven't seen any, 60,000 square foot tattoo parlors, but
Right.
maybe I haven't gone to Sturgis lately, I don't know.
But- So in C,
Yeah, right.
the request was to go from 6,000 to 25,000 square feet.
Well, I'm just dealing with
The uses, right?
the uses at the moment.
But we are
Right.
combining industrial business park. It's not industrial park and then business park.
This one is, the future are not,
Part of the problem is
yeah.
giving this a new name because our proposal had a new business park and had a new industrial park.
Right.
And then in order to grandfather the existing business park, I had to give it a new name. Because we had a new.
Which is industrial business
Which is
park.
industrial, or business industrial. park.
Regardless,
Yeah.
however you want,
Right, yeah.
but it's the combination. And in our new code, are we gonna have that combination?
Yes, the business park will allow 20% industrial, the industrial park will allow 20% business. So both of those are intended to be a combination. If it's in C3 district, it's intended to be more commercial, less industrial. And if it's in the I1 or I2, it's intended to be more industrial than commercial.
Right, with the intent that you
Right.
keep sort of the industrial, and the
Right.
business.
Based on what they were designated in the plan.
All right, now looking at this, what happens if a developer comes in and all of a sudden it turns to 40% one or the other in that site? Can't happen?
It wouldn't happen. We would have to
As-
keep track of what uses are there, which we're trying to do with the existing park.
So we
And if
start
they got to
to-
that 20% point, let's say in a industrial park, they got to that, they got 20% retail, or commercial. If they have somebody comes in that puts them over that 20%, it's, nope, sorry, you can't do it. It's over at 20%.
So we're actually very restrictive on how much we're gonna allow of one or the other.
Well,
at
those
this point.
limits, like I say.
We can have stores setting open, and
That-
because if they're a different use, we can't use
I
them.
would say it's not, we're very restrictive, we're very quantitative in that respect.
Right, because you're taking
That there is
industrial
a,
park
there
and
is
allowing
a, there is
commercial
a threshold
development.
Yeah.
that we
Which we
have
did, which wasn't
established.
allowed
Typically, you
before.
can't do in the industrial.
Right. I didn't mean to cut you off, Tom, but,
No, that's okay.
but you're right.
Keep in mind, the county has worried historically about losing industrial land. I mean, we
Yes.
referred to the corner of 26 and 32. 20 years ago, that was all zoned industrial.
Correct.
And slowly but surely, through a whole series of conditional uses, it became commercial. Then there was struggling to limit industrial to commercial conditional uses, basically. There was language put into effect that unless the parcel was small, really considered to be too small for industrial purposes, it could not be transformed through a conditional use from industrial to commercial. So I think some of this restriction, so to speak, is to prevent that from happening. So you keep your zoning somewhat pure, and you place commercial where you want commercial and industrial where you want industrial.
But is that what was needed in the county at that time?
My perspective was, this was even before me, was we allowed commercial in the industrial zone, just, it was almost by right,
Yeah.
quite frankly. Then we completely swung the other way and said, you can't have anything, pretty much. And then we kind of came back to the middle and recognized that the market dictates that you do have some flexibility when you're developing these parks. And is there a balance? Quite frankly, 10 years ago, to have sat here and talked about an employment campus with residential units, it probably would not have been something my department would have really, I'm gonna assume, supported. But now we recognize the fact that it's happening, it's on the ground, and many times it is appropriate. Coming up with the current zoning that is on Liberty Exchange. So it's zoned IR, business park is allowed in our current zoning, IR, and the business park definition of uses was developed with the developer and the Department of Economic Development. So everything currently that is in the code under a business park was a joint effort between the developer and the county to come up with a marketable product for Carroll. Now, years have gone past, the developer has looked at the park, as you see, made some suggestions for changes. The county, I would say, does continue somewhat to struggle with commercial being commercial and industrial being industrial. And many times, and in other counties too, pure industrial parks do have other uses that encroach upon them. But there's some that are really pure, like the one in Finksburg, South Carroll Gateway, you know, they're the heavier parks, you know, the heavier manufacturing.
Those are the industrial parks.
The real.
The real industrial parks.
Yeah.
And that's not what this is designed to be. This is really designed to be mixed.
Right, so the I-2 would be that heavy, keep it heavy
Right.
park.
Right.
And the I-1, as this group envisioned it, was light manufacturing, flex, R&D type of stuff. And this particular business park has that mix, but it did have that cap of commercial in the 20%.
Commercial C1, 2, 3.
Retail, the retail component was.
C3 specifically in there.
So C3, so all of these, this list, this one, A through M, are they allowed in C3 already?
Well, yes, but not specifically listed like this, so.
But if they're allowed, then why even call them out as not?
For the business park at that point?
Yeah.
Because we were trying to create at that point.
No, I understand, but if they're already allowed in C3, and you're saying that this industrial business park is allowance of C3, then why even call it
I
out?
mean, if we're gonna do B, we
Right.
don't have to worry about E.
Right.
No, I see what you're saying. I think because going back to, again, this was specific just for this particular property moving forward. So we did not change the composition of this. This,
I-
so
I-
that's what you're,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just kind of explaining.
No,
where
I-
origination came from.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, like Commissioner Fraser shared, is we're agreeing with B, with the I1, C3, both, then E is not
Isn't
even
allowed, right.
is regardless, because it's already allowed in C3.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was going, aren't you allowing
Not
C3, but not
retirement homes.
So
C2s
it's
and
a
these
non-
all
So
should.
not
Not
retirement.
all that stuff, but
Retirement homes
C1
less.
and C2.
All
Right.
those that are
Yeah.
allowed in C3 should be allowed.
Right, and some of
Right,
these
if
seem
we
like
go with this.
C2-ish kind of things to me.
Right.
And C2, what's permitted in C2 is permitted
Oh,
in C3.
And not residential except for if they're
Right.
currently existing.
Right.
which,
Okay.
so not to worry about E.
Well, are you all following on this?
Right behind
Mm-hmm.
you.
Explain where we are here.
So-
Clarify.
Yeah, so if we go with B, which is combining the I1 and C3 together, then letter E, allowing the 13 uses currently prohibited in business park, is not even an issue because they're already allowed in C3.
Right.
Most of
Or at
them.
least most
Most
of
of
them.
them, most of them,
Yes.
so. Right? Okay.
Then we all wind up in J.
Jay? We're not there yet.
So, can I maybe say, no, I'm not gonna contradict you.
No,
That's the whole thing,
no,
that's the thing. So are what we, is the direction that we're going, I think, maybe I'm out of the box here. I'm somewhere. So are you saying the C3 and the I1, you could create, hang with me, a business park? Let's not call it industrial or commercial, let's just call it a business park. And what you can do in those two is anything that's allowed in the C3 and I1 with no percentage restrictions. So basically.
In any combination.
In any combination. So in the C3 and the I1, you can create a business park, all right?
We didn't say the part about no restrictions on.
Well, Well, I think we're getting there, Commissioner. That's why I'm
He's
sending this
giving a
out ahead of time.
hypothetical.
Okay.
Because if you're gonna allow both of them, then having restrictions there doesn't make sense. You understand? If you're gonna
Right.
combine the C3 and the I1, having restrictions on one or the other doesn't make sense if you're gonna say you're gonna be able to do both. But what I'm saying is you can do that business park, and I'm not just throwing this out, because this is the way I feel we're going in this direction. That's just
Yeah.
that you create the ability to do a business park in the C3 or I1, and you can do basically whatever you want with those uses in there.
But why not create a category called industrial business park?
Because what I'm saying is though, because you're breaching over the two, commercial and industrial, what I'm saying
You
is,
are.
let's not call it that, let's just call it a business, well, because they're all businesses, doesn't matter if you're calling it an industrial business or a commercial business, they're all businesses, so just create, to help confusion with us maybe implementing, here I am trying to implement things a little at the end point. So we call it a business park, and you just allow that development of the ground to occur using C3 or I1 on those areas. You maintain your I2, which is your heavy, and you stick tough to that. You have your employment campus that allows you to do a mix of stuff, and you have percentages there. But for the C3 and the I1 areas, which, I'm looking at the map, and right now, I don't see a lot of big properties that this is gonna
Right.
make a lot of difference.
That's
Now,
correct.
moving in the future maybe. So why don't we just make this simpler and just do it that way,
And give
We
more
move back-
flexibility to the property owner for business development.
Absolutely,
Yes.
But
it does.
Again, from, what do we have limited in land? Does that do these properties, and they do have the right and the ability in that scenario to become completely commercial entities?
It could.
Is that what
Yeah.
I'm hearing?
Depending on the market, yeah.
yes.
Depending on the market.
So industrial land could become totally commercial,
Totally
commercial land.
Let's-
Altogether, that makes it easy,
So
yeah,
if
for
you-
sure.
So what you're saying here,
Except
Tom,
for
is-
I2.
Is that you're looking at
Yeah, that doesn't.
B and G, and everything else is actually not relevant if you compare to B and G.
Yes.
Yes.
Because everything else is basically allowed, like the size of square foot automatically go up because you're C3 now, so that the 25,600, whatever, it means nothing.
I mean,
All
I
the
think we
other
would have
stuff
to go
is
back
in
and make sure there's,
Right, but
they
if
don't
you-
conflict in any way.
Right, if
but
we're looking
the
at-
general concept, what I'm putting
Right.
out there, and I know, but I'll tell you, we're already,
Yeah.
with the existing one, there's gonna be issues with the percentages on the existing one right now. I see it.
But,
And so,
yeah.
rather than trying to
On the new.
Yeah.
beat ourselves up in the future, trying to do these percentages and making people, they're not in violation, or we have to deny permits. Let's just say you can do what the market drives you
Yeah,
to do.
I believe.
And that's what's happening now in Carroll County anyhow, I believe. I mean, that's what happened at 32 and 26.
It did.
That's what happened. And I don't personally, and this is my personal opinion, I don't see it changing in Carroll County. But maybe someone else sees a different vision. But-
If the board wants to go that way, I think you have to change clearly, we would have to change the industrial park and the business
Oh,
park.
we get rid of
Get
that.
rid of them. There's
Well,
no
It
point
would
in
just
them anymore.
become.
It would
Right,
just
right,
become
right.
Industrial business
But
park.
one thing we'd have to, is currently, you can have an industrial park, and I assume this is the same in the business park, but looking at page 59, it's permitted in I1 and I2. So if you want to keep your I2 district
point.
fully heavy,
Get rid of it in the I2.
then you don't
Yes.
allow this
Yes.
combo thing
Yes.
in
In the
Yes,
I2.
just C3 and I1.
I don't know, I'm
Correct.
just,
No,
I'm not,
no, what you
making a
said,
suggestion.
that is correct. It would combine the C3, I1 together into these business parks, but if it's the right thing to do, just by calling it a business park and not saying, well, I guess an industrial park would be I1 and I2 as an industrial park
Well-
allowance, or
certainly it would be I2.
it would definitely,
I think the
or
I2.
it would just be I2?
So
And you would just call it, so.
That's pure industrial.
And you could call it
Because I-
business/industrial.
And not have
Well,
business.
Right,
yeah,
have a business
but
park at
because
all.
I was thinking of a separate entity or category of that business industrial park, but if you think just combining them, I mean,
Well, I think what Tom is saying, I mean, that makes sense because we're already bringing the two together, why?
right,
So just for my edification, there is something special about when you come in with a site plan, and I say I want to create and I'm just gonna, an industrial park, business industrial park, I have, how am I going with this? I don't have to come, that gives me a separate set of sort of criteria to follow, right? If I just have industrial land and I want to put an industrial building on it, I don't have to call it an industrial park, correct?
No.
But if I want an industrial park, I have a whole nother realm I go down.
There's other
Is it-
criteria
right?
that can be established, that, whatever that criteria is, that you would have to follow, in addition to the site plan requirement.
Right, so if I just own industrial land and I just want to put a 100,000 square foot building on it, I can do it.
You can do that.
But if I come in to you, Clay, and I say, I want to build an industrial park on my acreage,
Uh-huh.
then aren't I going through a slightly jumping through slightly different hoops as we
You-
stand today?
There's
You would
limitations.
if you adopted the in separate industrial park criteria.
Right,
If I might, with Tom referenced, I think South Carroll Gateway. That is not, that was being developed, and when they come in for the site plan, they put whatever uses are on there that the zoning allows for, whether or not it's principal or conditional.
Right.
that's not a business park?
No.
It's just a series of industrial buildings.
It's a series of industrial buildings put on.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, so that's what I thought.
Yes.
So in going down, if we go down this path of creating this
Yeah.
one entity of business/industrial park, or whatever the title becomes, are we going to have 3 different entities? Just commercial property that I'm gonna put a Walmart on? Just industrial property that I'm gonna put my 100,000 square foot use or series of uses on? And then this business industrial thing that's gonna have multiple uses and built probably large partial, large portions all at once. Where you build, this flex space and then that flex space and then that flex space, right? And then there'd be, so do we really need, do you follow where I'm going? We still
yeah.
need industrial, we
If
still need
we want to
business.
have a piece of
Commercial.
ground
Absolutely.
that allows both the C3, I apologize, C3 and the I1,
Yeah.
then that would be the industrial park, or however it's called.
Business industrial.
Business park, industrial park,
Yeah.
and then whatever criteria goes along with it might be extra landscape or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I agree.
In that particular case, then, you're talking about one owner.
There
One
are-
owner has to come in as a
That's
business
correct.
park,
Yes.
not
Yes.
3 different people.
Right.
And
Right.
you're gonna do a Walmart and I'm gonna do a Target or, whatever. So it does come down to then just one developer.
Well, one site plan.
One
It could
site.
be.
Yeah, one,
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be,
Theoretically,
you could have
be.
multiple
it
developers
would
under
be
one
one-
plan, one
correct.
cohesive
Right.
plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where we would
That's
see
correct.
that is a conceptual idea of, say, take my 150 acres, this is what I want to do, and then we would then that would be identified as industrial park, industrial business, however it was labeled, and then it would be developed in accordance with that
Correct.
idea.
Yep. And like Tom shared, there's really only a few viable locations in the land use.
I would say at this time.
Yeah, at this
At-
time,
at this
currently.
time.
Right.
Right.
When we're doing individual site plans on, like, say, South Carroll, we look at each one individually. Each one is looked individually because the design was created.
That was a subdivision.
That's correct, and that was done by subdivision.
That was done by subdivision, where these industrial, these park settings are, like Linda
Are
said, one
typically
piece
in
normally.
the entire 100 acres, and I can't just
Right.
with the acreage.
Right, that's why I was
So
saying
we'll
there's a
still have
distinction,
it.
so we still need sort of the 3.
Well, that, I
Correct.
think, if we're correct me if I'm wrong, we have that now, even what we're proposing
Yes.
would have that.
Right.
This just makes it more,
combines those
yes,
two.
exactly, for the park.
So if you- Yeah, and you'd have to, and as a developer, you'd have to come in and say, I want that business industrial park. I'm not,
Yes.
and the
Correct.
word park makes a
Right.
difference. Okay.
Yes.
So back to these then?
Yes.
How many of the, if the board wants to go down that
It would
path,
accept it.
does
Most
that
of them aren't
eliminate
relevant
these
anymore.
Well,
questions?
Or all of
yeah,
this.
if we look, like I said, if we look at B on here, so you allow the uses for I-1 district and
Yep.
C3 district.
Correct.
And then you look at G,
Right.
allow all I-1 and C3 uses by right in any combination without conditional use approval.
And that one is
Then-
a little bit different, Commissioner Frazier, just because that one proposal that was presented is getting rid of the conditional use approval in the use table. It's saying any of those uses by right in the I-1 or C3 should be permitted by right.
Well, if we're saying that, if you're saying B up top,
Mm-hmm.
I would think that says that.
I would interpret B to mean, if it says conditional use in the C3, you still have to get your conditional use, whereas
Right.
G,
Okay,
I
okay.
believe,
I see
is,
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right,
that's the
okay.
only differentiation
That would be the
I see in
difference.
those
All
two
right.
proposals.
Then let's go with B at top. And then you combine the two districts. And if it's permitted by use, it's permitted. If it's conditional, still conditional.
Still conditional.
Yeah.
So, in this, are you then seeing that you would, and maybe while you guys will wanna think about this, are we then eliminating really what's on the carve-out for the existing business industrial, and we're just going with this new
Yes.
business industrial? So you're gonna eliminate
I see.
basically everything that's on page 23, 24, and
Yeah,
And
yes,
then
that would get
24.
struck out,
Yes.
and then they would fall under.
Less restrictive, the better.
Business and
Yes.
We're opening a
If that's the
tattoo
intent,
parlor.
so you have the board, I mean, that's where we would, that's what how I interpret it.
Yeah.
Drive-through.
My recommendation.
But I would like to see what that actually allows.
So what we can do is work on a proposal and bring it back, so you can see
Yes.
without all this confusion, have more
Right.
clarity about what that exactly is. So we can work on that for the next time.
maybe this
that we
section
meet.
plus the two proposed,
Yes.
old proposed business
can
and
see
park and industrial
everything
park. And then the
Side.
new compost
That's
thing,
what I'm getting
so we
at.
can see
Okay.
three.
Okay.
Let them do whatever they want.
The one other thing we have not addressed here is F. Revise the sign regulation of one freestanding identification sign no greater than 30 feet in height or 200 square feet per side to allow for two signs or 140 foot in height and 350 square feet per side.
What's allowed in C3?
Any sign in county anywhere, maximum 30 feet height, 200 square foot per side.
And planning commission
Well,
still
yeah.
discretion on signs.
Stay
And
with
that's
that.
anywhere.
That's anywhere in the county. I will say that on St. John's property, when it was first being developed, they did apply for a variance for their main sign out front to go higher. I think it was up to 45 feet instead of 30, but that was turned down, and they had to stay at the 30.
This sign
But-
section is a different, it's not
Yes.
here.
It's
is
not
it?
in the current
it's in the-
sign period.
No,
It's in
no,
the current-
no, it's not in this
Business
section on page 23.
Yes, it
Oh, it
is,
is. I'm not seeing it, sorry.
it's on 24, I'm sorry. 24 signage requirements as follows.
Oh, okay.
So it's specifically, it's B.
Planning commission would still have, this does not take planning commission's ability away.
No.
Because planning commission still has a lot of latitude, and authority when it comes to signs.
They do.
That's probably one of their stronger site
Yeah. That's to keep the signs
rules
where
that
they
they
are.
could have.
I'm
They
sure
need some
there's somebody
latitude
somewhere getting
sometimes.
They
prompted
have
to
it.
make the signs higher, so.
Planning commission has a lot of discretion and authority over signs. And that's one thing that they are very particular about when they're deliberating.
What's motivating the request for revising the signs?
I'm not sure.
For this
Yeah, bigger signs.
location, because it's off the road, in a higher sign, that's all.
What's the limit on that, Clay? Jay, you never-
For a sign,
And just 30 feet, is it?
30 foot's the maximum, and you can have a maximum of 200 square feet on each side of it.
So basically what's on page 24.
Correct.
If I might, Linda touched on a little bit, is that planning commission does review site plans, and signs is one of the most discussed portions of any site plan that we have. And so the current code does state 30 feet, and planning commission hears that frequently, and in the review of site plans, is looking for low monument signs. And just the fact that if the criteria was established, probably might lead to more
Debate. and
debate
conflict.
with the planning commission.
So the recommendation is leave it as is. If an exception wants to be made, they can come to the planning commission and request that, correct?
Yep. That's my recommendation.
Right.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I must say that with today's technology of all the Googling and smartphones, I don't know how much road signage actually impacts,
Good point.
traffic to stores. Because you can Google just about anything and you follow your app to the location, so I really don't know how much impact signs are having nowadays.
Good point, Commissioner.
I'm smart once in a while.
I don't get to say it to you very often.
Thank you.
What's next?
So, well, that concludes the text.
How about number
No, not
14?
really.
The 14, well, 14's a little bit different. It's not quite, into the nitty-gritty of the text. I think we can get through this in 20 minutes, at least with an introduction to this.
Yeah, please.
And this goes back to how the code would be implemented through the development review process. So, Clay, would you be willing to lead the discussion on the implementation of the new code and how this would move forward?
Peanut gallery.
So, what's, as far as, there's two sections of, two chapters of code, chapter 155, which is development and subdivision of land, and chapter 158, which is zoning ordinance. The proposal is a couple things. One is both be adopted simultaneously where the effective date occurs the same time, because they both have to rule with each other. Section 155 states in the code, and where this comes from has been occurred, is all principal permitted and conditional uses are subject to a site plan review. Therefore, if you change the code, that rolls back to 155. We're asking, one of the first item is an effective 10 days from date of adoption. We picked that because that is the standard date that the board has typically done in the past.
10 business days?
I'm sorry?
10 business days? Is it 10 business days or is it 10 days?
I guess it would be 10.
I don't know. I
I,
mean,
I'm not.
Is it a week and a half or is it 2 weeks?
It's certainly something, yeah, we can look into that.
Peanut gallery's saying it's 10 calendar days under state law, so maybe it
All right.
is.
All right.
Attorneys would know these things.
All right. As far as chapter 155 specifically, there's several things as to any new concept plan, and that is the initial beginning of the process, is concept plan submitted and accepted for review after that effective date must adhere to the new code. Second thing is that anything that was submitted prior to the adoption goes under the old code, all the way through. Anything that's even in process goes under the old code. Okay? And then, so what happens if, once a plan is, we do new site plans for brand new uses. We also do amendments to site plans, which are second amended, third amended. We call those new site plans. And they run through our process to begin with. And they run through the process of concept, final, planning commission. And so revisions are considered new site plans, and they would be subject to the new code requirements as applicable if it was a brand new, a brand new building. So that is what staff has proposed. And we have enforced a number of other, changes to code. That's very similar. That's actually very similar to how we've enacted previous code amendments in the past.
That all amended site plans are treated as if they were brand-new site plans.
That's correct.
So they go into the new rules,
That's correct.
which are more lenient than the old rules, so who wouldn't want to do that?
If, yeah, I mean, if they're in the process, we're,
It's right.
they may,
It's-
theoretically, you know, and so if they want, and actually the choice, you know, and that was, instead of saying, well, there were other options that were presented, many different options, and that's where we came down on.
Right.
Okay?
And the following, the last thing, which is the following proposal, that's no longer necessary because of some of the other code changes that we have made during these discussions, and how this flows.
When did we review all of these and put them together here?
When did we?
We
I mean, we've been going through it a lot, but
review them.
review the whole comprehensive part of at least industrial and commercial.
So we'll make the changes as discussed here, and we will do that, on one of the next meetings that we have.
Would the 18th be the time to review this and have input from outside sources on it?
Well, first, what was?
Before
what-
we adopt anything?
Well, nothing's being adopted until we have a public hearing, so really some of the next steps would be for staff to go back, make these final edits as has been discussed by this body, and then bring those back to you, making sure that's where we want this to rest for now. And then we can go back out for additional public outreach as was suggested at our last meeting. And if you want that to be, again, a question and answer discussion session, we can certainly do that. If there's any other issues that come out of this, we'll come back to you all as we always do and have continued discussion. And when you're ready for a public hearing, we would schedule a public hearing on this. And then after the public hearing, we would come back to the board during an open session, and ask if you're ready to adopt.
Because I do want to have input from the public, general people here, question and answer, dialogue with all the parties here present to hear what's going on, any changes made that time. This is part of a comprehensive plan, so we're only kind of giving preliminary approval to this until we see the whole comprehensive plan come together, correct?
Well, we're not even giving approval, we're giving approval for release.
To
for
move forward,
comments,
yeah.
But not, I
Not
mean,
to-
yeah, but,
not to
but you're
anything
correct.
else.
But you
I
gotta
mean,
start
we-
somewhere, you can't bring it all together and say, go, so we're doing 1, 2, 3, next week 4 and 5, and then. we bring
Then,
all-
but it all has to come together for sometime here. I mean, it's comprehensive, that's.
Well,
It is, but I thought we were going to look at this part here,
yes.
look it all through, make sure everything's fine,
Yes.
and then approve that and put it out there so that can start being used. And then, as we're looking at our residential and our ag after that.
How
That's
can
been
you do
the,
that for a comprehensive plan?
the plan has been, this is, and has been to, finish writing this, and when everybody's done, your public hearing's done, then you will adopt these 5, 6 sections. And then you start on the residential section, and then do the same
Is that
thing.
legal for
We
a
agreed to do
comprehensive
that.
plan?
Sure.
But, because I agree with Commissioner Weaver that you gotta put it all in context. You gotta put ag, residential in context to commercial,
Yeah, you gotta see the whole thing to
industrial,
approve it.
campuses. So I'm not sure, it may be premature for us to come to an adoption of part of a plan and then having another piece of it going through the same process and adopting that. We should be adopting it all together, but in order to do that, we gotta keep it open and work through this, just exactly what we're doing. And again, I appreciate this process, but then bringing the others in, and as you bring the others in, you're putting it in context to this. You're bringing residential ag for the county zoning in context to industrial and commercial. If not, we're,
Well, you are gonna do that.
when, that's.
No, well, you're gonna
yeah.
do that regardless of how you do
Right.
it. We could've, I mean,
Yeah.
we could adopt these particular sections for industrial and commercial, let them go out, and when we're going over the residential and ag, those of course will be brought in to context with these other ones, because they're already out there. It couldn't be done any differently
But
than that.
these could be changed
How is that comprehensive?
These
It
could
all comes
be,
together.
well, yeah.
Well,
but-
then you have to have time for input and people to digest all this and look how one affects the other, because now you're having a piece here and a piece here that, oh, we missed that
So,
somewhere
so
in here.
these could
It's
be
easy to
adjusted.
do.
The commercial industrial could be adjusted as we're going through, and that's what we just need to allow. We need to allow us to have the ability to adjust these appropriately as we're going through ag residential.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and there's always that ability to do a
That's
text
all.
amendment at any time.
So what
The
happened?
process that you have, I
Right.
think, approved to this point is not that.
Correct.
That's
Correct me
where
if
I'm
I'm
getting
wrong, the
confused.
process that I understand that's been approved is that this, what we're doing here is going all the way through to the text and map changes.
Yeah.
Then we're just taking the next step, so that, just for clarity, whether,
We're adopting these, but you can go to, like, if we get to residential, and there's something
That's not
that
what they're saying,
conflicts. Okay.
yeah,
No, I,
that's why I'm gonna make sure, Brenda, that
Yeah.
I think what our understanding of staff has been,
No,
that it's
I-
going all the way through
I understand
to the
that.
text to
But I'm
map
just saying,
changes.
And I'll
I'm
ask if
hoping
start
what we're
implementing.
saying is we adopt this, but then if when we work on residential or
not what-
ag, there's
that's not
something.
what the consensus
Okay.
is.
I know, that's why I'm.
So then
making
I've
sure
got a
it's
couple
clear.
questions. How many projects, requests are on hold and will be until 2021, until we get through this?
Yeah, it's,
Because we're not gonna get through this until sometime next year.
Yeah.
Are there projects on hold? And what does that do to them if we're not approving these and waiting until we get to? Okay.
The
So
procedure- Go ahead.
any requests that are in, it just, we're not,
But the procedure we said we were gonna
why'd they
follow
request something then?
was what I said,
Why
I
did they request
believe.
something?
We would take
Yes.
these all the way through and adopt these as we're looking at the other ones. So this can be out there, and people can put the request in, and things can move forward in commercial industrial, while we're going over residential and ag.
That was the
That's
direction.
what we said that we were gonna
That was the
do,
direction
right?
to this point.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I was gonna say, we already voted on
As
this.
long as we have tools in place where this could be adjusted,
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying, yes, through the text amendment.
that's all I care about, is, so you're right, so we don't necessarily have to keep everything open, but I just wanna make sure that we do have the ability to make appropriate adjustments to ensure that this is a comprehensive zoning approach, where we're taking all zoning and putting it together, and it tells the right story. That's all I care about.
But the plan would still be to adopt this text and make the map changes necessary to implement this text now. Well, you know, when you're comfortable.
I don't think you can till you do a comprehensive plan.
But then everyone has to wait until it's all finished.
Well,
and
you
people are-
do. This
but
is comprehensive.
It doesn't have to be, that we can come back and make changes as we see if there are some things that we overlooked or we didn't think about because ag said this, and, oh, wait, that doesn't match. So
Well,
we
that's,
could come back and
that's the
change
idea
it.
behind comprehensive. It's all
Well, I
done and
understand.
pulled
Yeah, I
together
do
before you
understand
adopt
that.
it.
No, well, it's all be pulled together, not necessarily before we adopt each individual
So
part.
you're
No.
picking industrial and commercial and separating them from everything else.
We
and
decided to do
implement
that
it.
as a board. We voted on doing it just that way.
I don't think it would be fair to our commercial, industrial investors and developers to keep them on hold all the way until the end of
Well,
everything
they can still
else.
develop as they're moving.
But
under the
as a
old-
businessman, I like to have solid ground to know where I'm at and what I'm doing. If we can wrap up this section ahead of the other ones, I think it'd be good for our business community and our economic development. I don't want to see those developers be tied up wondering what if, or they don't go change it down the road. The sooner we get this wrapped up and behind us, the better off I think we'll be to move on to the next part of it.
Well, they
Well,
can still operate.
we're down to a procedural question here. We can debate this till midnight tonight.
Oh, we'll go through it.
Hopefully not.
I'd like to know what the decision was made, go back and find out what the language was on the motion that we made, and then procedurally, we're gonna have to change that based on what I'm hearing here. Because I think we have a split decision here on what we're attempting to do. I hear a couple saying they wanna do it this way and a couple saying that way. So what was the decision that was made? Let's get that, and then we'll have to revisit it and bring it up for an additional vote.
Or at least additional discussion, yeah, I agree.
It has that discussion.
Yeah, because I don't know where this board was at prior to
Yeah, I
Commissioner
don't know what-
Rothstein and I coming on board.
I think I remember you, I think you're right, but I don't know what was said. So maybe we should go back and find that.
Get some clarification.
But regardless
I'm
of,
off, yeah.
even
Let's-
that
yeah.
last 10 minutes, the work that's been done, it's been phenomenal. And it really has, and I appreciate these work sessions. And we have covered a lot of ground in a relatively short period of time, so.
What's the state requirement on adopting this?
I don't know if I'd say appreciate it.
There isn't one. This is implementation
this
of our
is
master
ours.
plan and our freedom plan. So we're on our own schedule for
Yeah.
implementing the actual plan, which was adopted. But typically, you are expected to implement as quickly as possible.
That's fine.
You can do that next week.
So next week, we'll go over all the changes that were made to
Correct.
to
Two-two
date.
tie, I wanna see how
And
that
then, I guess, discuss what you want to do in terms of any kind of public process from there,
Because I know how-
Yeah.
All right.
right? Does that make
Sounds
sense? I don't know if y'all,
You all can adopt it.
Commissioner. Commissioners?
What, you got a question?
No,
No.
but I think you might want to hear this.
Oh, okay.
Or Commissioner Weaver wants to hear this. So next week, we'll go over what changes have been made to date and make sure they're written the way you guys wanted them written. And they make sense, and then we'll talk about whatever the next step is with regard to a public process, whether you want to have another couple meetings, and I use couple very generically, like we had before, where citizens are just invited to come in, date and time, and they, work through issues, or however you want to format it, we can talk about that. Or none, or more, whatever.
So, if I may offer, I guess in some ways for staff too, it would help to know maybe what direction then the board would want to take first. I think the public outreach meeting could be very different if we decide, this board decides not to move forward with adopting the text right now and waiting for all the other districts to be completed versus moving forward with this segment first. We may want to wait then to get final comments, let's just say, until all the text is done and everything's together. I guess I'm just thinking for what would make the most sense, because if the thought is that the residential and ag and conservation may change or may be affecting this, then we're getting final comments and one may weigh on the other in the future, so.
Well, I think we have to wait to decide how we're gonna,
Right.
if we're gonna adopt this. So
Right.
we can't give you an answer to that right now.
No, right now, I
We have to wait
understand.
until we come up with what was said in the last, or whatever, last year or 2 years ago, whatever we started this process, I don't remember when it was. But what the board said at that time, then we can talk about that and decide how we're gonna go from there. But so if right now, the only thing you can bring back to us is this revised text that we've gone over
Correct.
the last 2 meetings. It's been only two meetings, and bring that, we can discuss that. And then also, I think at that time, we would have the information from whenever the last board decided how to proceed with this. And so at that time, we can give you direction to on what to do.
Yes,
I don't see it, I can't see it any other way.
agreed.
Is it safe to say that this was the
Your
most
vision, Michael.
complex of the subcategories? Will residential be as complex and ag as complex?
I mean, they'll all be complex in their own unique way.
Because I'm wondering
I
if we
think
like.
residential will be easier and agriculture will be very difficult, very,
Yes.
very difficult.
Yes.
All right. I was hoping like we got the hardest one out of them
Yeah, I
first, but
think
you guys are
ag is gonna be
disappointed me now.
particularly
Hardest is yet to
challenging.
They're
come.
not
All right.
complicated.
Which
I
is-
didn't-
which is also another-
But there'll be more text and less map.
Well, but that's
Yeah.
also another thing about how long you want to delay the implementation of this part, and what impact that has on the rest of the community in order to wait for the ag, because the ag will be very, very complex.
Yes.
My guess of 2020 or 2021 probably might be spot on.
Well, 2020 is in 6 months, so.
Yeah, so that's why I said 21 too. 'Cause,
Is there a deadline?
No, but I'm just giving you an estimate.
He said it's 2022.
Because we want to keep having meetings and want to keep inviting people, so.
The only
it takes
deadline is
time to make, and you gotta post them and get the right time periods out, and, so
And this is something that affects the county.
I think we all know that, Commissioner
So
Weaver.
this is major.
And we have
Take your
lawyers
time,
making
don't rush it.
billable hours.
So they're loving it.
What's that?
So they're loving it.
Yes.
Okay, anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's